Boy, I've been looking forward to this stream all day. Actually, I've been looking forward to this stream since Friday when I got a chance to watch the new Paul McCartney film. And I knew what my next stream was going to be about. Now, the only reason I got information or notifications out as late as I did was I wanted to do this the right way. In other words, I did not want to do a stream on Man on the Run right after I saw it. I did not go out into the theaters to see it. You can watch it on Prime if you have Prime. And so I waited for it to come out on Prime on Friday, and I watched it just before going to bed. And I knew right then and there what I wanted to talk about tonight, but I also wanted time to review another documentary about Paul McCartney and Wings, and that was Wingspan from back in 2001. Okay. I'm a fan of that documentary. In case you're wondering which one that was, that's the one where Paul McCartney sits down with his eldest daughter. Heather is older than her, but Heather was his adopted daughter, but his oldest daughter from his loins, Mary McCartney, and she interviewed him about Wings. Okay? So my first question was when they announced that they were going to do this, and especially since they, and a lot of you people know I've been covering this right along. They released the Wings box set, a box set I still don't have and I want, okay? Um, and I want all three LPs, and I want it in LP fashion. As a lot of you know, I have a very small record collection. I have 155 records right now, but I've only been collecting for the last couple of years, and my good buddy Royce got me into it, okay? And so I've been collecting albums. First of all, okay, I'm gonna recollect vinyl. I had a huge vinyl collection back in the day, but I got interested because Royce was sending me vinyl. And he told me later that it was all an evil plot on his part to get me into vinyl because he's into vinyl. And I knew that vinyl was becoming popular again. And I always missed the entire experience of owning vinyl and playing it. You're involved in it. You're as involved in getting that and reading the liner notes, that can be read, because when liner notes came out on CDs, you just had to get your magnifying glass out. Now, not at first. I was still a young man when CDs came out, and I could still read that with a 20/20 vision, but as you can tell, obviously, I don't have 20/20 vision anymore, and my iPhone magnifier is often used with small print. For so many of us older fans, it's a good reason to get back into vinyl. And I don't see myself as getting 1,000 albums in the future. I don't know how far I want to take it. That certainly would be the outer realms of any dream of mine, because I'm also a fan of listening to music digitally as well. So I'm not just an old hodgepodge sitting around going, gee, uh, you know, I've got to own everything in physical media. Now, I'm not into CDs. When I got into CDs, I practically gave away my vinyl collection when CDs came out, and I actually counted that collection, and I had well over 1,200 CDs. When I then sold that, partially because of a financial situation and partially because digital music was just coming out and it was available. And I went, okay, that's the next phase. I've always tried to keep up as far as tech and everything else like that. And I'm a fan of CDs, only if I'm going to own physical media, I'd rather go with the vinyl. And I've explained that. and I'm a fan of digital. So as we go through this film tonight, we're going to talk about albums that are connected to it. We're going to talk about the man, Paul McCartney. We're going to talk about this film, Man on the Run. We're going to talk about Wingspan, which was the doc from 2001 that he came out with. We're going to talk about intentions of the film, or what would you call it, a purpose of the film. Are the films, both of them, accurate? And how does it compare? How do they compare to each other? All right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I was a fan of Wingspan. I have seen that documentary 30 times if I've seen it once. There is no doubt about it. Now, that leads me into another disclosure I want to make very clear here. If you're new viewers to the show, we've gotten a lot of new subscribers, and I've gotten those on my regular videos. And this might be your first time coming over to the Tribal Forum. Why is this different? First of all, when I do my regular videos, I try to do a more professional presentation as I do them. If I screw up, I can stop and go back a couple of sentences, and then through editing, present you something well more thought out. Let's just put it that way. Here on the Tribal Forum, yeah, I'm live, and I rely a whole lot on you kind folks, all right? I do not put myself up. I am the tribe master for the tribe, if you're brand new. And if you're a new subscriber, you are the tribe. If you're not a subscriber, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but if you're not a subscriber, just a viewer, you know, I don't believe in subscribing, Michael, but you're just a viewer and you make a comment, you're part of the tribe, okay? The tribe is not contingent on you being a tribal member, which is even a different thing. We have memberships on the channel. There are different kinds of things that I offer on this channel. I do shorts. I have an audience that just watch the shorts that I produce. I have audiences that will just watch my regular videos. I have audiences, some of you tonight, right here, right now, who only watch me when I stream, okay? And I also have audiences that will watch my members only videos. Now, I have 1,600 videos on this channel, and I've already explained to you guys that I have never produced one video less than I've always produced before I started memberships. But a lot of you wanted more content, and I made an agreement I would work twice as hard, okay, because I wasn't willing to give up what I was offering you here absolutely free. But for those of you who have financially supported the channel, I do have memberships, okay? And there's 2 tiers you can join. First tier, you become a tribal elder. Some of you, and then second tier, you become a tribal chieftain, okay? I take these positions very seriously. With memberships, you get extra powers. Every once in a while, we'll get a super thanks up here. We always read the super thanks live and as they come out. I'll stop my stream. I'll make a mental note where I was. I'll acknowledge that, whatever is said in that super thanks, and then get back to what I'm doing. And what I was just going to do, oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
James, you're on fire, brother. This is the third time in a row he's done this.
Oh, James, that is so nice.
So like I promised, when something like this is slightly different than a super thanks. What James has done, he's given a double gift.
Oh,
all right, the channel, he has bought 5 brand new memberships.
Oh, he's
and he's gifted it to you folks. So if it comes across your feed, that means the algorithm thinks that by your history on YouTube, you'd be interested in that. I would strongly encourage you to do so. And then whether you up or not at the end of the month, for 1 month at least, this is a free membership. For 1 month at least, you are a tribal elder, and you have access to almost 150 videos over there that aren't available here. And those 5 memberships, brother, thank you so much. That's like a $35 super thanks. Thank you. And you know what else James can do? I was just going to mention this before he did that. James, you know I love you, brother. Okay? And I'm so glad you've had some smooth sailing lately. You certainly deserved it, more than most. I know a lot of you are going through troubled times.
Oh, my goodness sakes.
Oh, my goodness.
Storm Cop again.
Oh, Storm Cop.
Oh, $20.
Oh, we're not going to be able to keep up with this guy.
Wonderful.
Could you read that $20 super thanks?
Thank you. I sure will. Storm Cop says, to all our new members, welcome to the tribe. Amen, Storm Cop.
And see, now this comes directly to, and so does the money he just spent, $55, my goodness, on the tribe. That comes here, so that's a gift to me. Thank you, James. All right, but the way he did it tonight, he sent a gift to me, and then he sent a gift to you and I.
He's wonderful.
Right? And I can guarantee you, the free membership, you're at least going to... I've got some of my songs over there. Now, we're going to talk about lo-fi recording when we talk about Paul McCartney tonight. I am the master of lo-fi recordings. That's my entire recording gig. I've recorded with nothing but a cheap Casio keyboard for orchestration, a bent neck Lyle bass, a copy Les Paul, and a Goya guitar that was actually really good. But a lot of my recordings were done on the most ludicrous equipment. But I love the creation process. So you can get an idea of what I'm like as a songwriter over there. I also have videos that are dedicated just to the tribe. I might be going over records and things like that, reviewing an album that I know won't get much traction over here. Or if I hear from my members, could you do a thing? I'll often do a video there, okay, on that. So thank you, James, so very much. I appreciate it. And before we get going, and like I said, I'd be willing to go right up till when Royce starts at 6:30 tonight. So I think I can cover everything we've got going tonight, all right? I could have given you the condensed version, but I wanted to take a little extra time and really talk about this, and I'll explain why in a moment. But on our last stream, the following people gave us super thanks, and I always do this. This is another thing that I do besides reading your super thanks out. The very next stream, I give you a shout out for doing it on my last stream. It's just the way Kimberly and I say thank you for your financial support. You know what you mean to us. I'm not kidding about that. Everything that you do goes into making this channel better. All right? So, last Wednesday, Michael Boswell came in. Oh, he was in right and left. But he was making comments. Man, he really drove that stream. And that stream did better than we've been doing. So we kind of were on a comeback with that stream. We had, it said 75, but I heard that we were as high as 78 viewers on that at peak time. That's good. That's getting back to where we were. And it's over 900 views now. And looks like it may secure 1,000, but once it's over 950, that's about where I like it. I like it if my streams get about 1,000 views, I'll be honest about that, or more. And we've been going through tough times, and you guys, man, and Michael made that such an exciting stream, both financially and by what he had to say. I really appreciated your input, Michael, especially on last stream, all right? He had some great things to say. But he gave us a $2 super thanks. My good buddy Royce gave us a $10 super thanks. And I'll be over at Royce after this show, all right? We're going to be talking about Tina Turner. And like I said, if I have to shut off just before there, reserve me that 4th seat, Royce, and I'll be up to help you out with the Tina Turner show. I'm telling you, between Royce and I, this is probably the biggest double header that Royce and I have ever done. You're talking about a woman who many claim to be the queen of rock. I wouldn't have a whole lot of argument with that claim, right? And if there is a true king of rock, if you took into consideration everything they've brought to the plate, I would say Paul McCartney is a definite finalist in that category, and beyond finalist in my opinion. All right, so Royce gave us a $10 super thanks. Deuces Wild gave us a $5 super thanks. Michael Boswell came in 3 more times with two $2 super thanks and a $5 super thanks. 3 in a row after the first one he did, so 4 times, man. And then another time with yet another, good Lord, how many times were you in here, Michael? You were in here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times. Oh my goodness. Okay. And then at the end, so he gave us a $2. He gave us all in all $2, $2, $5, $2, $2, $5. Thank you, Michael. And Joseph Blue came in at the very, this is Joseph Blue's DNA. It's almost like a sayonara at the end of the show. He came in with a $2 super thanks. And brother, all I can say is thank you for swinging the deuce hammer. That's what we call super thanks for $2. We don't care how much the super thanks is. It's nice to get the larger ones, but the $2 go a long way. As you can tell, look how many $2 we got on the last stream. It really led up to quite a nice financial boon to the channel. And we always bring that money back into what you see behind me, all right? Me getting information, I buy books with that make me more of, they say what an expert is someone who doesn't know it all, but someone who knows where to get the information and to tie it together. And so when I do that, you guys help make the show. You just make the show, all right? And I appreciate you all so much. Okay, so we've hit 40 thumbs up so far, baby. We came so close. That's why I put a tribal troll alert on, because we came so close. We had 4 thumbs down. I was watching it click down. We've got a few, morons that like to come in and go, well, I'm going to at least give them a thumbs down because they can't get through my security force. And I did want to give a special shout out to Zuma Van. Now, I don't know if Zuma Van is a guy or a gal, but Zuma's been with me for a long time and has been making comments on my regular videos. So it's so good because I do have a core amount of you that watch everything I do. You're here for my streams. If you see a short up, you tag it. Oh, I remember that portion, right? And you watch my regular videos. You keep an eye out for my polls. And some of you even watch every single one of my members-only videos. So that is absolutely wonderful. Good Lord, I mentioned that. It was 40. It's 45 right now. 5 more, and this show will hit probably a new peak audience. We're already at 66 out there watching, and trust me, all 66 of you are going to be glad that you tuned in, okay? So keep all of that in mind, and if you're watching this on the replay, keep this in mind as well. More thumbs up will make the YouTube algo dragon send this sucker over to people's home feeds for them to discover it. And like I said, I like to shoot for 1,000 views per
Michael,
stream.
it's Michael Boswell again.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, Michael Boswell, thank you.
Oh, and it's a $2 super thank you.
The
Swinging the
deuce
deuce hammer.
hammer.
What does he
Yeah.
have to say, baby?
He said it's only rock and roll, but I like it.
Oh yeah, me too.
Woo, yeah.
Me too.
We love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love
And
it.
if you're new to this channel, you'll find out that all these good people you see in the comments here in the Peanut Gallery tonight, as well on my regular videos that made it. I answered so many of you on my last video. It only hit about 2,000 views, but the intense dialogue on my last video was amazing. And I finally, in order to prepare for this, I had to let go answering a lot of you people, and I haven't got a chance to heart any, because of that video, my last stream, which I always do. But I'll do that tonight, late tonight, and I'll answer all you people from my last stream, and I'll try to catch up with any of you that have anything to say tonight. Because this is a big stream. This will be a good stream to watch in review. So let's get on to the idea of what we're talking about. Like I said, Paul McCartney, bass player, lead singer, and songwriter for the Beatles. John Lennon and Paul McCartney together, especially in the early years, wrote all of the Beatles' hits, with the exception of a few covers they did early on and any charts that they got. At first, George Harrison, their lead guitarist, and by the way, with the Beatles, you got 4 lead vocalists, right? And eventually 4 songwriters out of them. Now, when I say Ringo was a songwriter, to my knowledge, he had 2 songs that he did for the Beatles, one for the White Album, one for Abbey Road. He got credit for What Goes On, but even he admits he did very little, if no writing whatsoever on that. And he's credited on instrumentals by the Beatles. But other than that, that was his general output. George Harrison, who was so cheeky, and I love George Harrison. I saw who was on an earlier stream today. Oh, it was James's stream. And Groovy Lisa was in there and saying, George Harrison's my favorite Beatle. And early on, he was my favorite Beatle too, Lisa, in case you're out there. He had the coolest hair. He had the grooviest look. You know, it was like, yeah, Paul's too cute looking. And John, you know, he's cool looking, but I think girls would like George. He was the quiet, shy guy that got all the girls because they'd all try to ply him out of his shyness at parties. And he'd get lucky, you know. But he was cheeky enough to say, well, if John and Paul can do it, he decided to start writing songs. And his first song was, you know, he, his last breath, always poo-pooed his song. And I thought it was absolutely wonderful. It's a great song, and especially when you consider the time that it came out. Of course, John Lennon and Paul, and then later on, it was like trying to find room for George's songs on the album became a problem because John and Paul were vying for as much vinyl space as they could, and George would often get ignored. So the 2 dynamos out of the Beatles, despite the fact that George Harrison wrote some of their best hits ever, okay, were Lennon and McCartney. Now, of course, as the Beatles broke up, McCartney came out of the gate with McCartney album and then followed that with Ram. The 3rd album he did was Wings, Wildlife, then Red Rose Speedway, and he eventually landed a major hit with Band on the Run, followed that up with another major hit, Venus and Mars. After that came Speed of Sound. And as far as, and I'm not talking about live albums or anything else like that or compilation albums here, right? So after Speed of Sound, you got London Town and finally Back to the Egg. That is basically the Wings output, unless you count Tug of War, where Denny Lane was still on board because the album at first was going to be another Wings album. When George Martin got involved, he said, I'm not interested in producing a Wings album. I'm interested in producing your album, Paul. And Paul was already fed up. We're going to be talking about that because that's all in this movie. And he said, okay, Wings is over. Okay, and there's lots of reasons why Wings was over. But since Denny Lane was still on those initial recordings, and they didn't need to be redone. They worked good as backing tracks. He, of course, got credit for being on that album, Tug of War, which was originally going to be, just like Red Rose Speedway was originally intended to be, and that was a double album. Paul pulled back those songs from the double album aspect and later revealed them as the Pipes of Peace album that followed. And so Denny Laine, and that was 1983, and Denny Laine got a chance to be credited for that album. And the way they write this up and the way the film indicates it at the end tells you that everything was happy and rosy with Denny Laine. As a matter of fact, Denny Laine at one point at the end of the film, and I'm wondering where they got this freaking clip, folks, but he said, people wonder what broke up Wings, and he said, nothing ever broke up Wings. We continued to be Wings. We just didn't make any more albums. And of course, he was talking about him, Linda, and Paul specifically. He wasn't necessarily talking about Lawrence Juber and their drummer. What was his name? Anyway, all right. He was talking about, and he even goes, me and Paul and Linda, we're tight, tight, tight. And that's the way the film leaves it. Okay? So, this is at the end of the film. And by the way, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I said that in the comments before coming up here. All right? I am going to reveal everything I remember about this movie. So there will be no guesswork. John, earlier, before I got up here, was saying, I haven't seen the movie. I wanted to tell him, and I did. You'll be glad you got here, because you don't need to see the movie to watch this stream. I'll let you know. All right? And for those of you who are willing to listen about what this movie is about before seeing it, I would love to hear from you in the future. Did I hit it right? Let's get back to this idea with Denny Laine at the end of the film. Denny Laine and this soundbite makes it look like him and Linda and Paul, rode off into the sunset on 4 or 3 Appaloosa stallions in the Arizona desert, the way that it came off. All right? This is by far not what happened. All right? The end of Denny Laine came when Paul McCartney stupidly took a pot to Japan when Wings was scheduled to tour there. Now, always remember, Denny Laine made most of his money on touring, even though he helped write a lot of the songs. You know, the way they put it in this film, Paul and him wrote Mull of Kintyre 50-50. I guess there's an argument for that. But it was, they also give you the impression they started it together. And that is not true. Denny had the beginning. Far have I traveled. That whole, all the verses, right? It was Paul that saw the worth in the song and then added the Mull of Kintyre part to the song. So they both wrote it, but they didn't just write it. Denny had the whole thing, and Paul, remember, the last Beatle recording was in 1970, no John Lennon, just Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, adding a little insert to I Me Mine that Paul helped George write. Okay, Paul is a master at coming in with middle bits. Woke up, got out of bed, and that's what he did for this song. Then he made a deal with Denny Laine and wrote and bought the entire rights to the song. And so to this day, it says Mull of Kintyre, written by Paul McCartney. Words and music by Paul McCartney. All right? And it doesn't matter whether that's the official story or not. The real story is most of that song, 2/3 of that song, was written by Denny Laine and others. You can hear his influence, especially on Band on the Run and Venus and Mars and London Town, for that matter. Real strong presence and Speed of Sound. I don't care for Speed of Sound as much as a lot of you do. All right? All right, so that was one thing I saw at the end. It was like they had to have this happy ending, and I know that it's not true. They said when they brought up the end of you had Henry McCulloch, and then who was the other kid that came in? Jimmy. all right, Jimmy McCulloch, who had a bad drug habit. Okay, this is also toward the end of the film. Now, you're going, Michael, why are you going backwards? Well, the film goes back and forth all over the place. So it's a more disjointed narrative, much like the book is, by the way. And I do want to do a video where I describe the book and how it goes about what's accomplished there versus this film. But this film, I'm going to tell you one thing, because I haven't told you what I think about it in general yet. It bears study. It bears study, folks. This is an important film one way or another, and I'll explain that as we go along. But they talk about Jimmy him finally losing his battle with his drug addiction problems and everything else like that. And they don't mention the fact that one evening he was standing over, they were out at Rude Studios out in the Scottish Highlands there with Paul McCartney's farm. And we'll get to that in a moment because Paul McCartney's farm is very important to his story, okay? But he stood over the sleeping McCartneys with a gun in his hand, contemplating what to do. Okay, so this band, and then also when McCartney was put in prison in Japan, Denny Lane did an interview that was quite critical of Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney's the kind of guy, and we're going to discuss that because a lot of Paul McCartney's personality has been revealed officially for the first time with this film. See what I'm talking about? There is tons to talk about with this particular subject tonight. So we get this blending over there. Of course, when you compare this film with Wingspan, there's a lot of blending over there. As a matter of fact, with Wingspan, when we go through the incarnations, of course, most of you know that Paul McCartney started Wings as a foursome, right? You had Denny Sewell, Denny Lane, Linda McCartney, and Paul McCartney. They would add Henry McCulloch on the very next album, but there was only 4 Wings. And the way that this documentary paints it is Wings started with, and I told you this before on one of my videos, they're already making claims that really Wings started as early, at least as early as Ram, and there are even attachments to the McCartney album. And what they're trying to do, and this would never have happened, Paul would never have allowed this to happen 30, 40 years ago. Because 30, 40 years ago, most of the critics at large, even though fans were now starting to realize they didn't know what they were talking about, critics were still lambasting both his first record, the McCartney album, and his second record, Ram. But fans over the years, and you can ask my brother, back when I was still a teenager, I said it didn't matter. Then I got married, he'd come over, and by that time we were up to Venus and Mars. I remember one time and I showed it to him, and it's like there is no doubt about it. Every time that Paul McCartney put out an album, I was right there. He was the monster of the 70s, right alongside with semi-co-equals like Elton John, Stevie Wonder, right? Billy Joel, okay? These were monster single artists, and even though Paul McCartney was Paul McCartney and Wings, or just Wings, or usually it was known by those 2 entities, right? He wanted it just to be him and a bunch of guys, okay? And so when we talk about Paul McCartney's personality, keep that in mind, because this film brings that out time and time again. What was it that Paul thought of Wings? Or at least what was it that Paul wanted of Wings? Because at one point in the film, he says, I wanted it to be equal, but then I realized after a while that, well, I'm Paul McCartney of the Beatles, And that if I couldn't be just one of the guys, which I was so used to being, and we'll get back to that, because that's where he explains this for the first time at the beginning of the film. But he says, if I couldn't just be one of the guys, I decided I'd be a really good boss. I'd be a really good boss. That's what he wanted. And that's kind of how, and these are all older musings of Paul McCartney in the film. I love it how the disembodied voices, we don't get a bunch of close-ups of John Lennon when he talks, or Paul McCartney, the older version of him. No, they just keep those as voiceovers. They put out a little, like you see on my regular videos, a little thing comes up, a little information window, and tells you who's speaking at the time and everything. And so what you get is a very fluid film, and you can listen to it and just go, whoever's speaking is important, and just listen to what they think. It'd make a good audio book. Matter of fact, it's already out as a book. I bought it online, okay? So we have all of that. So when he thinks about what he is, that's kind of how Paul assesses himself. Now, there are several times in this film that several band members, for the first time, and this is not evident with the Wingspan's documentary at all, we didn't get too much from the other band members unless it was praise Paul, praise Paul, praise Paul. But here we got some criticism from pretty much all band members, okay? And I was surprised. I mean, this is an MPL production. That's his video and media entertainment conglomerate. Okay, so he's putting his thumbprint on this. And I was surprised that he allowed, especially early in the film, when Denny Sewell and Henry McCulloch both said very critical things. Yeah, they said that when they first thought that they'd be playing with Paul McCartney and be in a band with him, that first of all, they'd be making top dollar. Now, if there is a man on this planet that is capable of paying his members top dollar, it was Paul McCartney. And I think they quite rightfully thought that they would sow a much better money situation from him than they actually got. Many of them working, that he had just a meager pay. Often when they go on tour early, they'd charge for shows, and they were dividing up change with each other, right? They were living pretty much bare bones. Now, in Paul McCartney's favor, so was he and Linda. You see, Paul McCartney, at the very beginning of the film, explains something about what was going on. And true Beatle fans know this. He sued the Beatles. He had to. And there are parts in the film that, by John, later especially, lots of ties to John Lennon in this one, where in Wingspan there's not. Keep in mind there. If you guys go back and watch both of these back to back, you'll see in Wingspan, it's Paul being separated from all the turmoil of the Beatles. In this film, we keep going back to the Beatles in references all the way to the very end. Okay? So if there's a purpose to the other film, folks, Wingspan is a love story. Wingspan is all about wings, and because it was a family. It was Paul asking Linda, would you, if I started a new band, would you be willing to be in it? And she said, well, I don't play anything. I sing, but I don't play anything. And he says, we'll put you on keyboards. We'll train you in middle C, and I'll show you the way. She said, okay. All right, that's how it happened. Not like this film brings it up, because they're saying they were contemplating that crap with Ram, and see, when they do that, then that kind of attaches Ram as an honorary Wings album, especially since Denny Sewell was on it as drumming, right? But that didn't happen until after the Ram sessions, and the result of that little conversation was, of course, Wings Wildlife, a vastly underrated album that was never meant to be anything more than quickly put together tapes. Him just going underground and said, let that tape roll, which had a lot of the spirit that drove the McCartney album. I think it's wonderful. Dear Friend, and especially the song Wildlife, is amazing on that album. I consider Wildlife one of his grandest piano ballads ever written, right up there with Hey Jude, Let It Be, and Long Winding Road. Okay? I also consider Lady Madonna. That's predominantly him on piano. These are grand masterpieces, and Wildlife is a freaking masterpiece. So when people give that album kind of, they go clear of that, I've got, and now with both McCartney and Ram getting a lot of credit in later generations, people certainly get Ram, and then they certainly get Band on the Run, and they get Venus and Mars. Most people saying Venus and Mars being almost as good as Band on the Run. And I'll tell you right now, if I had to rate these albums, if I had to rate them in importance, the McCartney album's number one only because of this. If it wasn't for the Paul McCartney album, I would never have become a songwriter. I would never have learned to multi-track record. That is the Mount Rock Olympus album of all time for me because it affected my very life. And it is, as a fan, a masterpiece, despite what many people said. Oh, it's got little ditties on it. You need to go back and listen to it. It's a masterpiece. And don't expect it to sound like Dark Side of the Moon. That's not what the damn thing was ever about. He talked about direct injection. He showed you his hand going to the back of the tape recorder, plugging that microphone cable in to get that kind of recording. That's never done in a studio. Now, there were some works in the studio from, I think he did a bit of work on Maybe I'm Amazed in the studio on that, but the vast majority of it was recorded right there at home. Sometimes you hear babies crying, doors squeaking all over the album. It's an amazing piece of work, but if I had to judge it as far as its actual magnificence, not what it did for me, I would have to put Ram as Paul McCartney's very best album. I guess I'd put Band on the Run at number 2, although I'm half tempted to put it in co-position with Venus and Mars. I think Venus and Mars is a much more listenable album and usually the one I'll pull out these days to listen to. Some of the reason for that may very well be because it's like Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. How many times can you hear it, And so I haven't listened to the album in years and years, and I'm going to be, I listened to it when I got its copy, all right? But on LP, but I haven't really given it just let's sit down and give it a listen to on vinyl like I did back in the day. I can't wait to do that. I've been so busy on the channel, all right? Now, Paul McCartney also talked about how he goes about songwriting during this time. He says, I go by memories, I go by feelings, sometimes I go by my projections into the future, and then he says, for the first time, I often write these in fictional third persons. That was always one of John Lennon's biggest criticisms of Paul. He would say, Paul writes about Eleanor Rigby. He never knew no Eleanor Rigby, right? He writes about a paperback writer kind of thing. He says, I write about me. I write help, in my life. Norwegian Wood, I was having an affair. I write about me. He writes about made up people. Well, Paul then finished that part of that comment when he says, I often put it into fictionalized characters. He says, but it always comes back to me. It's always about me. And I can tell you before this movie was out, I've heard him in interviews say that before. So many people don't give him credit for that. All right, so the movie starts off, of course, with the trauma going on with the Beatles. Lots of things happening there, right? And Paul, at one point, first of all, you got to think about what's happening with the Beatles. 1969, you've got the Twickenham sessions. Not a good time. Paul at the John at the in fall of 1969 got the Beatles together and said, "I want a divorce." He's the one that broke up the Beatles. Paul makes that quite clear in this film several times, and most Beatle fans are aware that it was John who made the initial statement, and John felt that Paul took advantage of that and made a public statement to get on top of the situation, and that he had always wished that he had made a public statement. And Paul in this movie says, "I wish he had too," because it cost him more trouble than anything else. He was the bad boy. All three Beatles were bad-mouthing the McCartney album, and then when the Ram album came out, all three Beatles were bad-mouthing that as well. He had no friends of his old family involved. On top of that, the silly death clues that became predominant by 1969, and everything going on with that. The internal bickering of the Beatles that started back in 68 with the White Album. Paul had had enough. He needed to escape. He had met Linda. He had already partially escaped, because when they first met, Linda said, "Let's just go on road trips, go somewhere." "Well, I don't know the way." "Well, just go that way, that direction." "No, I need a plan. I need a map," right? And she was the first person to give him permission to get off his freaking itinerary. So he was experiencing some freedom at that point while he was still attached with the Beatles there in London, living on Cavendish Avenue and all of that. But that was enticing. And he did tell Linda, "Well, I have this farm up in Scotland." And she goes, "Oh, okay." And he wanted to get away. He was depressed. He was getting all kinds of problems. He was into fights with not only his three brothers, John, George, and Ringo, but he was fighting with Alan Klein. He was fighting with Phil Spector, and in later years with Jan Winter as well, that dirty bastard. So Paul saw money leaking from Apple in every way. He saw Klein making extra money, taking money from the bottom hand of the deck and paying himself what he wanted. He knew that if somebody didn't do something, that Apple would go broke in months, if not weeks. And so he put a stop to it by putting the Beatles into receivership. None of them could attach their money. So that gets back to what I was talking about, how
Oh my goodness.
Paul, let me get to this. I saw that. I'll be right with you,
Royce.
brother. Is that Royce?
Yeah,
$10
it's
super
Royce.
thanks. Thank you, Royce. Let me finish my thought here and we'll read this. So where Paul is now at a point of just wanting to give up. And so he tells Linda, "I've got this farm." They go out, they move there, right? And he starts to clear his head. All right, Royce gave us a $10 super thanks. Baby, could you read that?
I sure will. He says, Beatle news always draws a crowd. Yeah, there's a lot of
Sure
Beatle
does.
fans.
Oh, yeah, we've got 86 watching right now, baby.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have
and it was
90.
higher a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, well, this is a magnificent story.
I know. People
Okay.
are really, interested.
Oh, this is rock and roll history.
I know.
Okay.
I'm just glad that
Yeah.
people are,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and this is also, we're also talking about one of the greatest love stories. Like I said, Wingspan was the love story. It was the Wings story. Wings was an extended family. This is John and Paul. It ended like that. It even ended like that, and quite a tribute to Linda. Linda gets a lot of tribute in this new version, but she's under another guise than she was in that film. And that film was more point A to point B to point C to point D. This film jumps all over the place, and that's why I'm jumping all over the place. There's no point in trying to follow this film chronologically, because it rarely goes thoroughly chronological. There's a general chronological. The beginning of the film has the McCartney album. The end of the film is discussing Back to the Egg, right? But there's a lot of going forward, then backing up, going forward and even further than you were before, but backing up just after where you concluded before you backed up the first time. That's the style of the film. So don't get lazy when you watch it and think that you know what happened at what time. When, like I said, when Paul asked Linda to join the band, as far as my information ever goes, he did not ask her during the Ram sessions in New York City. Yes, Denny Sewell was there, and Hugh McCracken, guitarist, was there, and Paul offered Hugh the gig after they were done with this and they were ready to record Wingspan, or not Wingspan, but Wings Wildlife. All right, and he turned it down, right? So they went on and they just did as a foursome, and then added Henry as they were starting to record Red Rose Speedway. Okay, but here's Paul, and he's out at the farm. All right. Now, he is saying to himself, he actually is quoted as saying in this film, I was so low that, first of all, he says, I was a boy and I was a Beatle. And now I was whatever I was right now. Now we go back to the McCartney album. We go back to the song, Maybe I'm Amazed. All right. I was not quite aware of this. The song is all about fear. He makes that quite clear. His fear of not just of matching up to what Linda might expect to him as a man, as a romantic partner, perhaps a husband, but fear of what all of that, he makes it real clear, a fear of what all of that entails. And he gets right down to it. He had a fear of growing up. He had a fear of growing up. And so a lot of the songs, listen to the McCartney albums, Motor Cars, Handlebars, Bicycles for Two, all the things that have been discarded. Did he feel discarded by the other three Beatles at this time? Most definitely. It's an album of fear. I had never realized that until I saw this movie. That alone made this movie worth watching. Okay? And then he gets out there and he's at his wit's end. I'll never write it. He says, I was so depressed that I thought I didn't know what to do. I'd only been a Beatle. I didn't know where to go. I felt like I would never write another musical note ever again, his exact quote. On top of that, he was drinking. In the documentary, he says for a couple of months. But we know Macca, right? So that probably indicated more than that, right? He always gives us the safe and sound answer, and I like that about Paul. He puts his, the best face forward, right? But however long it was, he was drinking. He was drinking to the point of drunkenness. But here's the thing, see, that Scottish farm, he even told Linda, he says, I know you won't like it. I just got a bunch of sheep out there, And when they moved out, it was a self-imposed prison for Paul. He makes that quite clear. He needed to get out of town. This is the thing. Nobody could find him. As a matter of fact, at one point, a reporter for Life magazine gets it. They start to show part of it where he charges at him in the film, and he throws a bucket at the guy. And Paul came to his senses and said, well, I don't want that photo out. And so he gave the guy an interview and a free photo op if they would give him the film that took that picture. All right? So, but the fact that Paul got to that point that he would physically lash out, you can see the rage in his face, perhaps still drinking, and this was self-imposed exile for Paul. He didn't count on Linda. Linda loved the farm, folks. She adored it. The natural life.
Oh, yeah.
The rugged.
That'd be wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
And before long, with her... See, this is why I consider Paul and Linda McCartney one of the greatest love stories on planet Earth that I've heard about, besides you and me, baby. Mm-hmm. Right? But he was at his most despair. I'll tell you, I've been at that point, and Kimberly has been my only source back to normalcy. Okay? And when you've got somebody in your life that can do that for you, that's true love. I can't even explain how important that is and how rare it is with married couples these days.
Well, Linda inspired Paul. That was what was so, she became a musician with her husband.
Yeah. And she turned him on to stuff.
Yeah.
He wasn't a horse rider, and she taught him how to ride a horse, and he became quite a horseman. He sits a horse beautifully.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They always made their family their priority. Now, I know a lot of folks would say, but taking your family out on the road doesn't exactly give your kids a normal life. I got news for you. Paul McCartney's kids were never going to have a normal life. And he tried to supply that. When they weren't on tour, they went to public schools.
Yeah.
Right? And when he was on tour, they had a private nanny. They said that Linda often on tour wound up being, they didn't need a cleaner or a driver. She did a lot of that stuff. Right out on tour. This documentary shows a lot of that. So does Wingspan, by the way. Right? So family was very important to the man. So I love the guy for that. He's a freaking genius. He's one of the best bass players. I just mentioned why you could consider him one of the best bass players in rock. He's got to be one of the top 100 keyboard players in rock. Maybe 50, right? He's actually very good at keyboards. He has got to be in the top 5 singers of rock and roll. And he is, in my opinion, the number 1 songwriter in rock and roll, and that only eclipsing John Lennon, because John Lennon was murdered and he was only 40 years old, and Paul got over 40 more years to put out, output and write songs and amaze us further.
Oh, yeah.
But besides that one tragedy, you don't blame Paul for that.
No.
I know so many people who go, well, John was the real genius of the Beatles. They are wrong.
Oh, they were both genius.
They were, at first, they were the 2 geniuses of the Beatles.
Yes.
Right? And the other 2 caught up in many ways.
Absolutely.
Right? But they were the obvious talent. George Martin said that all the time. I'd always go back to John and Paul. As a matter of fact, when they did the Love album, and they redid While My Guitar Gently Weeps, George, as an apology to George Harrison, belatedly, wrote an entire orchestra part to accompany it, saying he didn't give George Harrison his due. Yeah. But we're not hearing too much from George not liking Paul in this one. What we get more often when we slip back to the Beatles story, as we continue with Paul's story, is making focuses on what John was doing and what he would say and everything. And there was a lot of good stuff from John. We've heard the obvious stuff that he's said in interviews, but and then he would, like John always did, he'd change his mind or he'd mellow on his position. And at one point in this film, he says, if I can't criticize my best friend, who can I criticize? Right? And I think I saw the rest of that interview once, because that interview seemed, and I think the interviewer said, oh, are you best friends? And he kind of backed down on that statement a little bit, but not by much. He said, well, we were at one point. Yoko right now is my best friend. That's who I hang out with. And I think he then tagged that in with, hey, listen, people who criticize me got to admit one thing. I picked partners. I picked Paul McCartney and Yoko Ono.
Yeah.
The Yoko Ono part didn't sell it for me, but did for many of you. I know a lot of you out there are Yoko Ono fans. I'm not. But I'm glad that she was in his life and everything. And then the Man on the Run gets to the point, and I love it how they brought Sean Lennon in here. Usually I wouldn't care about what Sean Lennon has to say about the Beatles story, since the Beatles were dead before he was born. But he is quite knowledgeable about the Beatles and his father's history, and he knows Paul is a friend of them. He's kind of an insider these days, I guess. And the one thing that he said several times was that his father always had respect for Paul, right? And that he disagreed with his father on some things. For example, he thought and still thinks that Ram is a masterpiece. And Ram was one of the two albums that got the most criticism from ex-Beatles. All right? That album walked around with a black eye for so long. I bought it that day. It came out. I told everybody it was a masterpiece. I never changed my mind. Ask my brothers, ask every friend I've ever had. The damn thing is the best thing he ever came up with, and he came up with a lot of great, great stuff. Okay? So when you compare the two films, you get Wingspan representing the following: family, regrowth, embracing of that family, and becoming a man and going out on his own. In this film, we see a shattered Paul and all that he had to embrace as a man, not just a husband. Here is the first time we hear Paul as a man clearly indicate that during the recording and the time that he and Linda spent while the Beatles were still meeting up occasionally at Cavendish Avenue as a time of fear for him. And it wasn't a fear of losing friends of the Beatles. That didn't help. It wasn't a fear that the band was breaking up. That certainly didn't help. A lot of things that could have depressed him. But his main focus is this amazing woman that he met that was challenging him on what he could actually do at any given time from the second they met. You always wondered, why didn't he marry some hot model from... Well, he tried that. You know, she was an asshole. Later on, he tried that. Okay? No, Linda becomes a much more beautiful woman. I always thought she was attractive enough, but not an amazing beauty. But when you get to know her through Paul's eyes, she's a goddess. She provided him everything a mother could provide for his children.
Him. She grounded
Perfectly
Paul.
said. Yeah.
That's what, it's like you're the outgoing one in our relationship.
Right.
I tend to ground you more because you're more the artist type.
That is so
and
true,
you
babe.
You need a bit of your opposite to round it out.
Oh, never marry your twin.
Yeah.
No,
No.
You're asking for trouble. And it also means that you're subconsciously asking for more of yourself.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. No, you've got when you hook up with somebody, you got to have enough of the same beliefs to attract.
Right.
But you've got to have some tension there. Someone who'll call you on your shit. I occasionally her shit comes out much less often than mine. But we're all humans. I think I do that for you a bit, but more often you do it for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
and I'm a creative kind of person, so I can tell you, Paul, creative kind of person. I'm not putting myself on his level. But as a creative kind of person, like Paul, I can tell you, artists, we need that. It's not just having a muse. We've got to have grounding. Yeah, baby.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the fans resented the way that John kind of inserted Yoko Ono into the situation. It was, it just what she wasn't presented right. I think it's
right.
almost like he just inserted her in,
right.
Or she inserted herself.
Well, okay, everybody says...
caused problems.
Yeah, everybody said she didn't understand it, that, they accidentally met at a gallery, and John went up on the ladder, and the card said yes, and he knew he had found the love of his life, when, in fact, prior to that, Yoko Ono was around Paul's house. She was out to meet a Beatle. And he said, well, no thanks, love, but I've got a friend, John, you can go over there. Gave her the connection, and that's how it started. she was actively trying to meet the Beatles, and yet in later interviews, John Lennon would say she didn't even know what a Beatle was. Bullshit.
Well, John knew her better than anybody.
Right.
So I guess you have to take what he said
Right.
with a little more weight.
Right. And I'm happy that John found the love of his life.
Yeah.
He died with in the arms of the love of his life.
Yeah.
If you got to go, I can't think of a better way. As a love story, it's as important and equal to anything Linda or Paul had, except that when I see Paul's story, and I go, that's kind of closer to the kind of lifestyle I see myself living. And what is important to him is his wife and children, and being fearful of not matching up to the level that he needed to be as a man. Like he said, folks, remember, I was a boy, I was a Beatle, I was a, what am I? Oh, that? Fatherhood, marriage, long-term relationship, adulthood? He hadn't contemplated it until he met Linda.
Yeah.
He was going with the show.
Yeah, and I don't think Linda had an agenda other than, wow, I met this. She wasn't out looking for some rich guy.
Well, no, Linda was a free spirit, but
and
she
she definitely admired
right.
the band.
Okay, and Linda, like anybody else, was a person. She had a lot of
No, but I mean, she didn't have an agenda.
Shortcomings.
I kind of feel like Yoko kind of had a bit of an agenda.
Well, Yoko had an agenda, and Linda was sleeping with anything that moved before she met Paul McCartney. All right,
Yeah.
that's how it started. She was a receptionist. She liked to take photos. She said in this video, she says, when I got outside of myself, I took my best videos, and I can tell you anytime an artist gets outside of themselves, they do their best work. Yeah. So I had a new respect for her, and I'm not cutting her down. It was the time of what it was happening. She had a lot of sexual conquests. She was quite, especially, you got to understand, back in the day, she had those strawberry eyelashes, and often those would be unattractive in certain photos. But when she first met Paul, she had that black mascara on and was, absolutely beautiful when she made herself up. And all the hound dogs of rock and roll had tried to have their way with them, and a few with her, and a few of them did. But I wonder if she was their conquest or they were hers.
Yeah.
But once she had settled in with that, once she connected with Paul and saw him as a potential mate, she tapped into her motherhood and never backed away from it. And that's where you start judging her, if that indeed is a good word at all.
It was organic. It felt more organic.
Right.
Yoko kind of felt like, okay, there's an agenda here.
Yeah.
I mean, she was. It was like John inserted her into the creative process, and I wouldn't blame the other band members if they resented it.
Right.
I wouldn't, because
Well, many band members resented it. A matter of fact, rock stars, Royce has talked about this. One time, John and Yoko jammed with Frank Zappa, and then they did a re-recording of that tune, even though Zappa wrote it and claimed they wrote it. Everybody's ears were bleeding on side 2 of Peace in Toronto. Give Peace a Chance. The original John Lennon and the Plastic Ono Band album. They would insert her all over the place. There were tons of, I can think of 4 or 5 instances where the other musicians didn't think it was any fun.
I mean, Paul didn't just insert Linda into the Beatles,
Well, no, now, I also have read many books, and there were certain band members that didn't think she quite flew to the King of the Roost. And they wished that they had,
Well, she didn't need to. She just needed to float Paul's boat. Okay?
That's right. Well, and that's why Paul eventually in the film goes, I couldn't be a good, just one of the folks in the band, so I tried to be a good boss. Now, when they went over to film or to record, Band on the Run, the film for the first time actually openly has Henry McCulloch and Denny Sewell openly saying they hadn't been paid enough. They had been put on a small salary. They didn't expect to be out at Rude Studios and living off the land, and they needed that money to come. Paul explains that, yeah, well, I wasn't paying attention to the accounting. And I can understand that because Paul had his accounting people putting Beatles into receivership. He was being careful with his money. Linda had a little money.
But you know, he was smart financially, very smart.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so he knew what he was talking about.
Of course,
you know.
But everybody thought there was more money coming, and that's why they quit. And Paul said that where McCartney was an album of fear, Ram was an album of celebration. Band on the Run was an album of anger.
And inspiration.
Anger, folks.
Too. Yeah.
Nah, anger. He went to Legos.
Oh, so you think
angry.
It's a statement?
Oh, he was mad that they quit on him.
So that was like
he
statement to that part of his life.
Well, and what he said in many interviews is, just you wait. I'm going to make a freaking great album. And he was angry. He even states he was angry when him and Linda were attacked by bandits in Africa, and they stole all of his cassettes to the songs he had written.
That anger
he was angry.
really propelled him, and so that was a good thing for him.
And he got angry with Fela Kuti that they have in the film. I never actually saw a photo of him that really showed me, and they show him dancing with one of his chick singers when he accused Paul of stealing Africa's Sound, man. And Paul goes, see, he showed it to him. He goes, you call that stealing Africa's Sound? And the guy goes, oh no, it's okay. So there was a lot of anger. Paul was chain smoking. They didn't bring this up. He actually passed out. They thought he was having a heart attack. That's when he quit smoking, was on Band on the Run. He was a heavy smoker. He was smoking 3 packs a day, sometimes 4.
He was trying to just keep up with what was going on.
For the first time since the Beatles broke up.
Wildly successful, and he came from a relatively, probably poor, upbringing.
For the first time, baby, since the Beatles broke up, Paul was fucking angry with every single Beatle and all former members of his band, and this was his big fuck you, I'll show you what I can do.
Right.
And look what he did.
They didn't trust each other. That was part of the problem.
Right.
They didn't trust they didn't have a minute hardly to think.
Right.
And just be themselves. And it was so pressurized.
Yes.
They were in such a pressurized existence together that, and
you got to understand, an album of fear, an album of celebration.
Yeah.
An album of anger.
I think you're right.
Now at this point, he had hit gold and he could do no wrong. And he followed that album, even though the film barely covers it, or for that matter, it barely covers the rest of the albums.
Yeah.
And when you do that to Venus and Mars, whoa. And there's even an argument, even though I don't rank Speed of Sound as high as a lot of you folks, that Speed of Sound certainly had the hits to be recognized. These hits are played while the documentary is going, but there's little information. You don't get the information you get that of him recording the McCartney album or him recording the Ram album. And if you want information on recording and how these things came about, you probably want to rewatch Wingspan, folks. But if you want to know a little bit more about the man, Paul McCartney, and have your eyes open for the first time, because I'm telling you, if there is one man in rock and roll that I come close to bowing down to, it is Paul McCartney. I just saw another content creator say that if Bob Dylan died, she'd be devastated. That's her number one guy. She's certainly entitled to her opinion, but Bob
Paul
Dylan
McCartney
would be far down on the list for me. It would be a big death. I'd miss him. But there's others I would miss. But on the top of that list is Paul freaking McCartney. The greatest songwriter, only because he had more time. Remember that. Of the 20th century, in my humble opinion. And he's still occasionally able to knock one out of the park.
His time.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we went to 6:17. I told you I'd go a little bit over. This will give me enough time to get on over to Royce. Thank you so much. We're at 69 thumbs up. We only need 31 more thumbs up to get a further bump up on a review of this. I want to thank all of you folks for
what a great
showing up. We
forum.
had a really
Thank
great
you,
audience
guys.
tonight. A large portion of you are here right at the end. Join me and Royce. I would imagine Dan's going to be over there. Was Dan in the audience tonight?
No, I
I didn't see him
tonight.
Yeah, I told everybody to go watch your latest video, Dan. I saw it and gave it a thumbs up. I said that on Caitlin's stream earlier, but then they told me you had already left. All right, it's good to see you getting busy with your channel. He'll be up there, I imagine Chris Elliott will get. And we're going to talk about another giant of the music industry. I told you we had one hell of an evening planned for you, because when I get off here in about 12 minutes, we'll be talking about Tina Turner, baby.
Woohoo!
All right.
I love Tina
Who don't
Turner.
love Tina Turner? Man, the
I
acid
know.
queen of rock.
Especially when you think what she went through.
Oh, yeah, no.
You know, and
No, another triumphal story.
that's right.
I
And
hope we get to
She
that.
was inspired
Yeah.
in her songwriting by her experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Strong woman.
Thank you so much for all your super thanks. I'll give you a shout out on my next stream, of course, one more time, and on my next video. I always do that. I want to thank each and every one of you, because it doesn't matter whether you give a super thanks, a thumbs up, or whatever. I do this for you. If you've watched this and found it at all entertaining, then I accomplished my job. And I'm Michael Noland. The channel's name is Michael Noland. The bottom line, when I stream live, it's called the Tribal Forum. I'm the Tribe Master, but I only start the discussion. You guys always finish it. On Sundays, I have less time to get to the comments here. But Kimberly will be taking some screenshots if I see anything
Oh, yeah.
interesting. We'll talk about this further, and of course, I'll be answering comments on the replay of this stream. All right, folks, I've got to get on over there. I love each and every one of you. For those of you who are going through tough times, prayers to each and every one of you. And I'm glad that I've heard a few of you are in a relief time of sorts. That's always good. And I'll see you on Wednesday at 5 p.m. when I stream once again. And of course, I'll see you on my next video. Night, folks.
Good night.